Hello everybody, my name's Tom and I'm back to talk to you about F1 Fantasy. In this video I'm going to be reviewing the Imola Grand Prix in terms of fantasy. There's plenty of other YouTube channels out there which are going to do race reaction and the best social media reactions and blah blah blah, but I'm purely looking at from a fantasy point of view. That's all I care about, so let's get on with it. Imola's just happened and I'm just going to go through fairly briefly how the drivers did in terms of fantasy. So I'm just going to go through in order of where they finished. So we've got Max Verstappen in first place. The Red Bull looking really, really strong, looking fast. Charles Leclerc just didn't seem to have an answer for it. I mean, yeah, there was a bit of possibility of him overtaking Perez, but that obviously led to the mistake in the end. So it's really interesting to see that the Red Bulls are potentially as fast or maybe even quicker than the Ferraris all of a sudden, and shown like really clearly for the first time really that they're really reliable. Like they're quite comfortable in the end. 1-2. I know Charles helped out by crashing a bit. But yeah, the Red Bull's looking very exciting prospect going into Miami, which first thoughts on the Miami track, even though we've never seen anyone drive around it, is that it might actually favour the Red Bulls. So really, really interesting going forward, looking at Max and Sergio. Lando Norris in third place. Pretty good performance from the McLaren. Obviously, Ricciardo had a disaster right at the beginning of the race with Carlos Sainz. And then I think he had damage. He was carrying damage for the rest of the race, so he couldn't really make any inroads any further. But Norris, took advantage of the melee at the beginning and got off to a really good start. Like he was launched off that start line really well. And the McLarens looked pretty good all weekend, to be honest. And I know there's a lot of talk about the McLarens being track specific and everything. I don't know how much they're playing it down and how much McLaren might actually be back in the fight. Looking good. I know Norris is good in the past on Imola. Like he got the podium last year, podium this year. So yeah, I mean, hats off to Lando. Did really well there. George Russell, don't know how he does it. Honestly, don't know how he does it. P4, again, another one that really took advantage of the big clash at the beginning between Sainz and Ricciardo, and just sort of, the door opened up for him and he shot right through it and held his own for the rest of the race pretty much. Again, 10 points from positions gained. He's consistently gaining those points, and you'll see in a minute when we switch to the other page, the main page of the spreadsheet, that Russell is doing really, really well on getting those points for the positions gained, because the Mercedes just doesn't seem to be able to qualify particularly well. It doesn't seem to be able to get its tyres up to the right temperature, but when it gets to the tyres in the right sort of working range during the race pace is considerably better than what they're showing in both practice and qualifying, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, I know Hamilton struggled, but he really did get stuck behind a train, which ultimately, when they eventually turned DRS on, became a DRS train, to be honest. So Hamilton really couldn't make any inroads there, which is interesting to see. But Russell, yeah, he's doing really well in terms of fantasy at the moment. Still really expensive, like hovering around 24 million. But yeah, definitely, something to think about going forward. And the fact that he's now going to be on a race streak, so an extra 10 points up for grabs for Miami. So it's definitely a consideration for our teams, I would say. Bottas, wow, what a drive. Bottas is just insane. And I wish I listened to my own advice from my video last week. I was like, oh, Bottas, he's not going anywhere in my team, blah, blah, blah. I think Bottas is just too good. And lo and behold, what do? I take Bottas out. In fairness, I did bring in Kevin Magnussen, who had a good race, not scoring quite as highly as Bottas, but I do regret taking Bottas out based mainly on what happened in the first practice session. I think I've definitely learned a lesson there, not to base too much, especially given that it was only one session. I think I went too much in on the fact that the hazards looked really strong, also the fact that it was wet, which I think benefited them. So I think definitely for me, lesson learned. Don't get too excited about the practice sessions. Let's follow the process a bit more. Let's look at all the numbers and everything, and get a clear picture in our heads before we jump ahead and think, oh, practice session, let's change all our plans. And yeah, so that bit me this week with Bottas doing really well. And yeah, I think the actual race pace, especially of that Alfa Romeo, in terms of what Bottas can provide. I mean, Guan Yu Zhou did pretty well as well, climbed a few places. But Bottas in Alfa Romeo is just, the race pace looks really good. So at 9.4 million currently of recording this, Bottas is looking like a really good option still. Leclerc, again, like I've already touched on, the Ferraris, they've got their work cut out now with the Red Bulls. Really looking super competitive with that reliability really put the pressure on Leclerc, and it looked like third place was the best Leclerc could do, and obviously he pushed it a bit too much towards the end, had a bit of damage, and pulled it back to P6, which is quite respectable. It's going to hurt a lot of people that went with the Mega Driver on Leclerc this week, but is what it is. And one of the reasons why I didn't go for the Mega Driver on him, partly because of the rain, partly because the sprint race is just kind of extra danger, basically. The more racing, the more danger there is of stuff happening. And ultimately, right near the end, he did end up losing some points. So I feel bad for all the people that did put the Mega Driver on him. I can see the temptation to do it. But now, obviously, the opportunity for everyone who didn't do that is a good opportunity potentially in Miami. As Leclerc is now on a double streak. He's now on the qualifying +5 points and the race streak +10 points. So definitely a possibility of doing the Mega Driver on Leclerc not next week, the week after. Tsunoda doing really well in P7. The AlphaTauri looking a bit stronger this weekend. Gasly managing P12. Again, stuck in that sort of train. Couldn't overtake Albon. He had, lap after lap after lap. He couldn't overtake the Williams. So it's kind of interesting that Tsunoda's got a lot out of it. And Gasly, not so well. I mean, he gained a few places. But yeah, Tsunoda having a really good race there. Impressive, but in terms of fantasy, still not interested in AlphaTauri for me. Vettel, much better weekend for the Aston Martins. I think... yeah, it's a tricky one. Stroll again proving that he's the points master of gaining points from positions gained during the race, because again he doesn't qualify super strong. You can see here in the race he's P15, but he's climbing those places week after week. He's getting those extra points. Looking good. And same story for Albon. Very same story. I keep saying that Albon is looking really strong. Once again, gaining loads of positions and a really strong race to keep ahead of the likes of Gasly and Hamilton for most of the race. Pretty much he was just leading them along. I know it's a bit of a tricky track to overtake on, but yeah, it's kind of another promising signs of Albon coming in at around 7 million. Like, he could be an alternative to Magnussen if the Hasses don't look good one week. I've already touched on Gasly. Hamilton again I've already kind of touched on. It's not looking like he can handle that car at the moment, which is really interesting that Russell's doing really well and Hamilton's struggling. But yeah, Hamilton obviously massively overpriced for the car he's driving at the moment. So in terms of fantasy, not going to go anywhere near Hamilton. Ocon, tough weekend for him, tough weekend for Alpine in general, to be honest. As you can see, I'll talk about Alpine in general, Ocon and Alonso. I mean, Alonso. How long can this streak of bad luck go on for? Obviously what happened in Australia, followed on by today, getting smacked by Schumacher, that first little chicane of the race, and all absolute chaos. Sainz goes out, Fernando gets huge amount of damage to his side pod and drops back and eventually retires a couple of laps later. Really, really unfortunate, because again it could have been a strong weekend for Alonso and once again failed to deliver. But let's not be reactionary. I don't think he should be immediately chopped from all our teams. I still think that the Alpines are looking strong, and he's on a streak going into, I think it's just a qualifying streak for, obviously it's a qualifying streak, not a race streak, qualifying streak for Alonso going into Miami. So he's still a contender in my team despite the horrendous numbers that he's currently posting. I genuinely think it's just real bad luck. He had Australia, he had the gearbox problem, he had the safety car come out at the wrong time, and then he's been crashed into through no fault of his own in Imola. So yeah, really, really unlucky. I still think the points potential is there for Alonso. Similar sort of story for Ocon. Points potential was really good. Similar sort of price to Alonso. Didn't have a great race this weekend, with obviously the trouble in qualifying, which put him right at the back of the grid. Made up a few places and respectable in the end. But yeah, the 5-second penalty as well for the unsafe release. Ocon and Alonso, I still think, are good options despite their pretty awful weekend this weekend. Zhou for Alfa Romeo. I still think Alfa Romeo's, like I said already, Bottas looking really good. I wouldn't touch Zhou personally. I think Bottas is the one to go for. And Latifi, I'm not going to talk about Latifi because let's face it, he's not going to get into our teams anytime soon. As for Carlos Sainz, like I say, it's kind of unfortunate. I don't want to place blame or cause any arguments in my comments down below, but I do think it was more Ricciardo's fault than Carlos Sainz's fault. From my personal point of view, I think Sainz left him the space from what I could see, and he was slightly ahead of him going through the corner. So I think Sainz it was his mistake in Australia, but I think through no fault of his own, he's got the DNF here in Imola. So it's unfortunate, but I still think he's a strong contender, and I still am quite possibly going to have him in my team, at least as a constructor, with Ferrari possibly going into Miami. So yeah, that's kind of the summary for that. Let's hop over to the main page here. We can have a look at the points per million and everything. Okay, so we've got the Red Bulls. Interestingly, the points per race, they're producing 51 points per race, which is very, very, very similar to the Mercedes and the Ferrari as a constructor. But obviously, the price difference between them and the Ferrari means the Ferrari's points per million per race is far superior. 1.59 is still absolutely fine. There's nothing to be sniffed at. But yeah, I mean, I think because of Sainz's couple of DNFs, that value is being dropped right down, and the Ferraris, I think, are probably better than this number, but at the same time, Red Bulls are probably better than this number because they've had a couple of DNFs as well. Mercedes, again, I wouldn't touch them as a constructor in terms of fantasy because the car's just not good, let's face it. Russell's doing well, but Hamilton's struggling, and I just wouldn't touch them. It's, for me, the only constructor going forward. Even though McLaren are on a quality streak for Miami, I still think I'm only going to be touching Ferrari and Red Bull going forward. The Haas and Alfa Romeo is producing good value, but I think the main bulk of points, as you can see in this column, points per race, like as much insane value as the Haas are providing at 2.2 points per million, on average you're only actually producing 15 points. So this column here is really important. You can see the dark colours representing the higher points here, and Ferrari and Red Bull for me are the only really real options. That might be me being a bit short-sighted, perhaps you might argue, but that's where the points are. I want the points. So yeah, let's quickly move down to the drivers and have a quick look at what's going on. We'll scroll across here. So as you can see to the spreadsheet, I've sort of changed all. One of my subscribers in one of my recent videos suggested I do it, so it's all nicely color coded. So it's really clear now. You can see exactly who's, like, the darker colors show up really nicely who's scoring the highest points. It's really nice. So yeah, I've already touched on like pretty much all the drivers going forward. You can see here I've added an extra column just to include the sprint for positions gained. You can see Stroll. I've mentioned Stroll in recent videos, saying I think he's potentially a decent pick for his price, but despite the fact that he's gaining so many points, as you can see, 34 points in total from positions gained, which is above everyone else. You can compare that to poor old Alonso, who's on minus 36. Oh, poor bloke. But yeah, I still think in that price range, despite the huge gap of points gained from Stroll compared to someone like Bottas, I still think in this price range, Bottas is just, he's just too good at the moment. I mean, look at the points per million per race for Bottas. 1.97 is really, really strong. I'm loving that look of that Alfa Romeo. I mean, let's face it does look like a nice car, but realistically, the race pace is there. Bottas's skill is there for everyone to see. I really, really like Bottas going forward. Let's see if he squeezes into the team going forward. I'm going to very quickly have a quick look at a potential team for Miami in just a sec. Bear with me for a minute. I'm just going to have a quick look through the rest of the stats here. So Leclerc, despite his fall from grace slightly today, still coming in at 2.25, which is really good value. Alonso, like I said already, his numbers aren't looking great, but I still think the potential is there for him. So don't count him out. Don't count him out. I think he can still do a good job despite the horrific numbers. I don't know if that's just me being stubborn and just like wishing he would do well, but I think the potential is definitely there for him going forward. Let's not be hasty and just kicking him out of our teams. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You can see for yourself the rest of the values that are there and everything. It's going to be interesting. I'll do another video next week looking ahead more specifically at Miami. I'm just very briefly going to flick it over to the team here, and this is the team that I'm going to heavily consider going into Miami. It doesn't fully maximize on the streaks. You can see Perez, Sainz and Leclerc have all got streaks with this current build. This is actually the team I had going into the first race in Bahrain of the season, and I've kind of gone back to it now that the Red Bulls are looking strong, and I know the Ferraris are offering great value at 25 million, wherever they are, but Verstappen's looking so strong. If the reliability is back to the Red Bull, this is definitely a team I would consider, because the Red Bulls, as a constructor, gives you that extra cover of Perez and Verstappen. And then going into Miami, there's I wouldn't say a high chance, but a pretty fair chance that I end up putting the Mega Driver on Leclerc going into Miami to capitalise on this double streak and the fact that the Ferrari's still looking strong. Not set on it yet, but it's definitely something I'm strongly considering. So, but with this team, you put the Mega Drive on Leclerc, and then you can turbo drive probably Perez, depends on how things go, and that also lets you prop up the team with Bottas and Magnussen, who I think are just value like for the rest of the season. This could literally be a set and forget team, to be honest. Like, forget what happens in the practice sessions, just put this team in and just like reap the rewards over the course of the season. Of course, this doesn't involve any of the Alpines or the likes of Lando Norris, but the truth is you cannot have everyone in fantasy. And I think the main points this season will be coming from Ferrari and Red Bull. And this team, like I said, going back to the week one, the only reason I really came off this because the Ferraris look so strong and the DNFs from Red Bull. But I think going forward, this could be a really good team. So yeah, I'm gonna, like I say, I'll be back next week for another video looking specifically at Miami, looking more at the track characteristics and who it might suit, and looking at who we can squeeze into our team. And I'll give my bit more detailed opinion on who I think, whether I think Mega Driver on Leclerc or whoever next week might be a good idea. So that's it. That's kind of my quick summary of. Quick summary is probably like a 50-minute video. No, not that bad, but yeah, that's my summary from Imola and my current thoughts going forward. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks very much everyone for watching. Stay tuned for next week's video at some point. I hope your team's done well, and let's look forward to Miami. Stay tuned for more videos. Catch you later. Bye bye.